I remember the smell of soap on my hands that morning. I had been washing dishes, slow and steady, the way you do when your mind is somewhere else. My grandson's voice was still in my head from the night before, asking if everything was going to be okay. I told him yes. I always said yes, even when I didn't know. Then the knock came. Not loud, not angry, just official. Papers handed to me like they already knew I wouldn't fight back. Words I couldn't fully understand, but I felt them anyway: accusation, custody, neglect. They said I failed him, said I wasn't fit to protect the only family I had left. I walked into that courtroom carrying more than a folder. I carried every promise I'd ever made to that boy, and they looked at me like I was nothing. The benches were full, but it felt empty where I stood. My name sounded different when they said it out loud, like it didn't belong to me anymore. The lawyer assigned to me didn't even meet my eyes. He flipped through papers like I was already lost. And then the officers stepped closer. One grabbed my arm. Not hard enough to leave a mark, just enough to remind me who had control. The other laughed under his breath. "Careful," he said, loud enough for people to hear. "Wouldn't want her causing a scene." A few people smiled. Not because it was funny, but because it was easier than speaking up. I felt small, smaller than I ever had in my life. My voice tried to rise, but it got stuck somewhere between my chest and my throat. I wanted to say I wasn't what they thought, that I had raised that child with everything I had, that the system they trusted had already failed us once. But no one was listening. The judge wasn't even there yet. And still, the room had already decided. They pushed me toward the front like I was a problem to be handled. The officer's hand stayed on my arm a second too long. A quiet kind of disrespect. The kind that doesn't leave bruises, just memories. "Stand right there," he said. So I did. Because sometimes you stand still, not because you're weak, but because you know something they don't. The room shifted when the clerk spoke. Everyone rose. Papers stopped moving. Conversations died mid-sentence. Authority had arrived. But I didn't turn toward the door. I didn't need to. Because I wasn't waiting for the judge. I was walking toward the bench. At first, no one understood. You could feel it, that hesitation, that confusion trying to catch up with what was happening. The officer's grip tightened again, like he thought I had lost my mind. "Ma'am," he snapped, pulling slightly. "That's not your." I looked at him, and this time, my voice came out clear. "Let go." He didn't. Not right away. Not until the clerk spoke again. But her voice wasn't uncertain anymore. "Your Honor." That's when his hand fell away. That's when the room changed. I stepped up, slow but steady, every eye finally seeing me, really seeing me. Not as a case, not as a mistake, but as the one person they should have recognized from the start. I sat down, the same chair they thought I would never reach. And for a moment, no one breathed. The lawyer who ignored me couldn't lift his head. The officers who laughed couldn't find their voices. And the system that tried to break me had to face me. I looked out across that courtroom, at every person who had already decided who I was. And then I called the case. My case. And the men who put their hands on me stood there as defendants in a courtroom I now controlled. And the officer who laughed asked for permission to speak before I decided whether he'd ever wear that badge again.